She walked in quietly, carrying a simple notebook under her arm and wearing a temporary badge on her chest. No one noticed her. Not when she greeted her coworkers politely, not when she finished her tasks ahead of schedule, not even when she took 3 buses a day just to avoid missing her internship. To the company, Camilla was just another face. Just another intern. No name, no weight, no story. But what no one knew, and she never bothered to mention, was that behind that shy demeanor was a young woman who had crossed countries, collected languages, and overcome a hard life shaped by effort, persistence, and faith. She spoke 10 languages fluently. The only one she didn't speak was the language of showing off. And all of that would have remained invisible if it hadn't been for the day luck turned its back on the CEO and he chose to mock the wrong person. "If you're so smart, then translate," he said, not realizing he was about to be silenced by the most powerful kind of answer, talent. No one ever noticed her, and maybe that was Camilla's greatest strength. Every day, she walked through the company's revolving doors with light steps and a calm look in her eyes, always carrying a folder in her hands and a book tucked away in her bag. To the cold hallways of that multinational company, she was just the new intern. But behind that quiet demeanor was a restless mind, shaped by a tough life and a daily routine filled with invisible effort. Camilla grew up among moving boxes, always hearing a new language in the background, since her mother, an international translator, took her from country to country to keep her contracts and her hope alive. Camilla's childhood was anything but stable. Every semester meant a new home, a new culture, a new language to decode. At school, she was the weird one. At home, she was too grown-up. But in the middle of all that instability, she learned how to observe the world with sharp eyes, to adapt without complaining, and to push through even when everything felt pointless. The faith her mother had in their future became the rock Camilla built her courage on. After all, when you grow up carrying silence and longing in your suitcase, learning to smile with your eyes becomes survival. At the company, Camilla was fine with doing the small tasks. She checked spreadsheets, organized schedules, answered emails. Always polite, always on time. She never showed up late, not even when the bus broke down or when she'd only gotten 4 hours of sleep after a night of studying. That intern badge may have looked temporary to others, but to her, it was a once-in-a-lifetime chance. "Just one more door I can't let close," she'd whisper to herself in front of the cracked mirror in the tiny apartment she shared with her mother. Funny thing is, among all the loud professionals, inflated egos, and fake hallway greetings, Camilla was like a blank page. No one asked about her. No one knew that this soft-spoken young woman would mentally translate every email into German just out of habit, or that she read French novels on the subway to keep her vocabulary fresh, or that she'd snuck into international conferences just to listen and learn, sitting in the back row, unnoticed. But she never said a word, because she had learned that in a world ruled by appearances, humble intelligence is often seen as a threat. Deep down, Camilla knew her quietness was a kind of armor. She'd been dismissed before. People had laughed at her accent. She'd heard things like, "Young women don't know anything about business." And instead of snapping back, she stored every comment like fuel. What others saw as pain, she turned into drive. That's what kept her studying every day, even when she was exhausted. That's what made her believe, almost stubbornly, that all her effort would, one day, be seen, recognized, maybe even applauded. One time, in the cafeteria, she overheard 2 managers joking about a big upcoming meeting with international executives. One of them laughed and said, "If the interpreter doesn't show up, we're screwed." Camilla smiled to herself, not out of arrogance, just because she knew, quietly, that if that moment ever came, she'd be ready. Not because she needed to prove anything, but because of persistence. When you come from where she came from, you can't afford to wait for opportunities. You have to create them, even invent them if you must. Still, there were days when her heart felt heavy. Being invisible hurts, and she knew that. Sometimes she cried in the bathroom, afraid she'd never be seen. But the next day, she'd show up strong, because that's what her life had always been. Fall, get back up, swallow the pride, take a deep breath, and keep going. For Camilla, overcoming wasn't some one-time thing. It was a way of living, walking through judgmental looks and still keeping her head high. While her coworkers posted photos of vacations, champagne toasts, and job promotions, Camilla was at home translating old documents, writing essays, and practicing accents. Her mother always encouraged her. "You're going to shine, sweetheart. The world doesn't see you yet, but it will." And Camilla believed her, because she had been raised to plant seeds even when the ground seemed dry. Life had been far too hard for her to grow cynical. She needed faith, faith in tomorrow, faith in herself, and faith in something bigger than the humiliation hidden behind fake praise. To her, the office was a stage of disguises. Some talked loud and knew little. Others knew a lot and stayed quiet. Camilla chose to be in the second group. She believed that the right moments can't be forced. They must be waited for, like listening to the rhythm of life before stepping into the dance. And maybe, just maybe, it was that quiet rhythm that made her so powerful, even if no one around her knew it yet. Until one day, the rhythm changed. It was supposed to be just another Monday, one of those slow starts with yawns, coffee, and late reports. But something felt off that morning. The building buzzed with tension. Upper management rushed around like ants in a panic. An international delegation was on its way, with representatives from 5 different countries. A multi-million-dollar deal depended on that meeting, and the official translator, believe it or not, simply didn't show up. The conference room was ready. The executives were seated, but the panic grew, because without communication, even the biggest empire can crumble. Camilla was there, sitting quietly, as usual, in the corner of the room, jotting down notes in a plain blue notebook. She watched everything in silence. The panic in the assistant's eyes, the sweat on the deputy director's forehead, the growing tension in every movement. While everyone else fell apart, she remained calm, like someone who had already learned how to breathe deep before the storm. The CEO, frustrated, shouted into the phone, cursing the missing interpreter. "Unbelievable! Incompetent," he yelled. The delegation had already arrived, and no one had a clue how to properly greet them. That's when Camilla, almost without thinking, raised her hand. It was a small, quiet gesture, almost timid, but it brought the whole room to a standstill. "If you'd like, I can help with the translation," she said, her voice steady, yet respectful. The CEO, a man known for his sharp tongue and inflated ego, whipped around, frowned, then let out a sarcastic laugh. "You? An intern? If you're so smart, then translate." The room, previously chaotic, went completely still. Some people laughed. Others looked away. And Camilla, cheeks slightly flushed, simply nodded. His words echoed in her mind like cold blades. But she didn't flinch. She didn't justify herself. Didn't mention her diplomas, the country she'd lived in, or her years of effort, faith, and perseverance. Because people who know what they carry inside don't need to prove anything. She took a deep breath, stood up, smoothed her hair with a quiet gesture, and walked to the front of the room. The sound of her steps on the marble floor felt like a drum roll. The quiet girl was now facing the most feared man in the company, with the calm of someone who's already survived worse. The CEO leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, confident he was about to witness a train wreck. What he didn't know was that he was about to witness something, yes, but it would be greatness. Camilla picked up the documents from the table, looked each foreign delegate in the eye, and with a soft smile said, "Shall we begin?" And then she started translating. With surgical precision, she moved from English to German, from French to Japanese, then to Italian and Mandarin, without stuttering, without pausing, without missing a beat. No one in the room even breathed. Eyes darted around, as if trying to make sense of what they were witnessing. That intern, until then practically invisible, had become the center of the room, not because of scandal, but because of sheer talent. It felt like watching a ballerina perform alone on stage, when no one expected her to dance. A choreography of words, accents, tone, and presence. It wasn't just translation, it was a living display of faith, persistence, and years of quiet effort. Across the room, the CEO tried to keep his composure, but his discomfort was obvious. He cleared his throat, checked his watch, rubbed the back of his neck. His pride was crumbling, and for a man like him, that stung more than any business loss. But Camilla wasn't there for revenge. There was no arrogance in her posture, only competence. The calm of someone who wasn't improvising, she was harvesting. Because for those who have faith in their journey, the harvest eventually comes. And sometimes it arrives in front of a full room, even if the seeds were planted in the dark. At the front table, a Korean executive whispered something to the French delegate, who smiled and nodded in amazement. The Italian representative applauded quietly, and Camilla kept going as if it were just another task. She wasn't moved by applause. She was used to silence. She wasn't looking for recognition, just space. And in that moment, without asking for permission, she had claimed it, not with shouts, not with demands, but with excellence. Behind that tense moment was an entire life of overcoming obstacles. The girl who'd once been called too much for studying too hard. The teenager dismissed by her teachers. The young woman who'd heard, "This isn't for you," so many times. She had to build a shield out of her own tears. That was the Camilla now shining in front of them all. Not because of luck, but because of everything she'd built, even when the world kept telling her she wasn't enough. Her faith in herself had been her compass. And now, it was pointing her toward a new future. The meeting continued, but something in the room had shifted. The respect had changed. The way people looked at her had changed. It was as if, in that instant, Camilla had stopped being just the intern and become something greater. An inspiration. A living reminder that you don't underestimate someone with a story, with scars, with purpose. And the CEO, well, he was starting to realize he might have just made the biggest mistake of his career. Worse still, he had made it in front of the whole room. The first few seconds were filled with disbelief. How could someone so young, so quiet, so ordinary, take command of a room like that with such confidence? Camilla's translation flowed like a river that knows its path, strong, smooth, unshakable. From English to German, French to Italian, then to Japanese and Mandarin, she moved through languages not like someone who memorized vocabulary, but like someone who lived inside them. It wasn't just about translating. It was about building bridges. And at that moment, she wasn't an intern. She was connection itself. The foreign executives looked relieved, then impressed. They started smiling, leaning in to listen more closely, nodding with real engagement. The words made sense. The conversation had rhythm. The proposals were finally taking shape. Camilla explained technical terms, paused at just the right times, adjusted jokes, respected cultural gestures. She wasn't just translating words. She was transmitting meaning, with accuracy, with empathy, with the kind of skill that doesn't come from a textbook, but from life. And in that silence, she was proving what no one expected to see. The room watched it unfold like a movie. A drama where the underdog heroine, long underestimated, finally responds. Not with outrage, but with greatness. The CEO, once so puffed up with arrogance, now sat sweating quietly. His face changed color. His eyes darted, looking for anything to distract him from the fact that he'd mocked the one person who could have saved him from international embarrassment. And now, she was doing exactly that. Camilla, meanwhile, looked like she was floating. She didn't tremble, didn't stumble, didn't falter. It was as if every late night, every rejection, every ounce of faith she held when no one else believed her had wrapped around her like an invisible shield. Each language that flowed from her mouth carried a memory, a challenge, a victory. Because to her, language was never just about communication, it was survival. One of the Chinese representatives asked a long, complicated question. Most people in the room didn't even catch half of it. But Camilla not only understood, it was like she translated the meaning straight from his thoughts. She rephrased it perfectly and even adapted the context for the American attendees. The room broke into applause. For the first time, the clapping was genuine, spontaneous, heartfelt. The deputy director, clearly moved, whispered, "She just saved the whole negotiation." And the CEO, he just lowered his eyes. Pride had officially lost to competence. It was hard to put into words what was happening in that room. Some people were taking notes, others were filming discreetly, but everyone, absolutely everyone, knew they were witnessing something rare. Camilla hadn't just translated a meeting. She had flipped a switch inside the company. The way executives looked at interns changed. The way quiet talent was treated gained a whole new perspective. All because of a young woman who stayed true to herself, even in the face of mockery. But Camilla wasn't there for revenge. There was no anger in her eyes, only focus. She knew this was her moment, and she embraced it with the ease of someone who didn't need to prove anything, because she already was. When the meeting ended, the foreign delegates lined up to shake her hand, one by one. And in every handshake, there was respect, recognition, gratitude. She had earned it through effort, persistence, and faith, the three pillars that held her up, even on the days when everything seemed to be falling apart. The CEO's silence was almost deafening. There was no apology, no words, but his eyes said what his mouth would never dare. I was wrong. And as Camilla walked past him, calm and composed, she simply said, I'm available for future meetings, sir, and kept walking, without looking back, because someone who spent a lifetime weathering storms doesn't get shaken by late thunder. She didn't need him to admit it. The victory had already been claimed. Outside the meeting room, the atmosphere in the company's halls was different. The whispers were different. The looks people gave her had changed, not intrusive but respectful, as if everyone sensed that something had shifted. As if they understood that from that day on, that quiet young woman would no longer be just another badge, but a name no one would ever forget. And all of it because of one simple thing, her undeniable competence. 1 week was all it took for the name Camilla to stop being whispered and start being spoken freely throughout the company. She was no longer the intern, but the girl with the languages, the one who saved the deal, the one who silenced the CEO, without ever raising her voice. The story first spread internally, then leaked through employee social media, and soon reached the company's headquarters. Everyone wanted to know who this young woman was who, through sheer effort and faith, turned an international disaster into a successful, sealed deal. Camilla, however, remained exactly who she had always been, calm. She didn't let the curious looks or sudden lunch invitations from senior managers get to her. She knew recognition was nice, but real respect is the kind that stands the test of time. Don't be fooled by quick applause, sweetheart, her mother used to say. It's the silent kind that really matters. And with that in mind, Camilla carried on, steady and quiet, still sipping coffee in the break room, still greeting the doorman with a smile, still catching the same crowded bus every morning. But something had, in fact, changed, and it wasn't just how others saw her. It was her position in the company. She was called into a meeting with the international relations team. She thought it was just to give feedback about the translation. But when she walked in, there was a contract waiting on the table. Immediate promotion, permanent position, triple the salary, and an offer to become the company's new intercultural communications coordinator. The director, a serious man with little expression, simply said, Camilla, you've shown us that talent doesn't come with a badge. We'd like you to stay. She held the paper for a few seconds in silence. Then, with a soft smile, replied, yes. The news spread faster than a click. The whispers started again, but this time they sounded different. Now, there was admiration. Without ever asking for it, Camilla had become a reference. People began asking her for book recommendations, course suggestions, podcast tips on languages. She always answered kindly, but she never made a big deal out of it. She didn't want to become a guru. She just wanted to work in peace, to harvest what she had planted with so much effort, and to keep believing that the world still has room for those who build quietly. The CEO, on the other hand, had no choice. The board demanded a public statement. So there he was, standing in front of dozens of employees, holding the microphone and, visibly uncomfortable, admitting his mistake. I underestimated someone brilliant. And today, I've learned that arrogance is leadership's worst enemy. He didn't mention Camilla by name, but he didn't need to. Everyone knew. She, out of politeness, watched from the back of the room, near the door. She didn't need a spotlight. Her victory wasn't in that speech. It was in the path she had walked to get there. A path of persistence, courage, and a talent no one could deny anymore. Camilla's mother watched the video on her phone, moved to tears. "I told you the world would see you one day," she kept saying, crying and laughing at the same time. Camilla just hugged her tight. She knew that this achievement wasn't hers alone, it was theirs. It was the result of sleepless nights, of sudden moves across countries, of a faith that never wavered. And it was also the reflection of every no they had heard, because now they all made sense. Without them, the yes wouldn't have meant as much. Behind the scenes, invitations started pouring in. Competing companies sent job offers. Universities requested her for lectures. Magazines wanted interviews. But Camilla turned them all down for now. "There's still so much I want to do here," she'd say. She wanted to solidify her place, support other quiet young people like her, and develop programs to support international interns. Because she knew, when a door opens for you, it becomes your responsibility to leave it open for others, too. And so she moved into a new office with a large window and a light wooden desk. It wasn't luxurious. It was simple. A picture frame with a photo of her mom. A book in every language. And one handwritten quote taped to the wall. "Don't underestimate the one who walks in silence. Sometimes they're the one holding the map." It was her reminder of who she was, where she came from, and why, despite everything, she never gave up. Overcoming isn't measured by how loud it is, but by the change it creates. Those who once ignored her now greeted her with respect. Those who once mocked her were now asking for advice. And Camilla, with her steady and gentle way, responded to everyone. Because to her, true success never breeds arrogance, it breeds empathy. Every step she climbed with effort was also a place others could one day stand. If they wanted, she'd help. If they didn't, she'd carry on. But she would never forget where she started. And that's how, on an ordinary day, Camilla realized, sometimes the biggest revolutions start with a mocking phrase and end with the silence of the one who said it. The company's routine was never the same after Camilla. She, who once walked through the hallways like a shadow, was now remembered even by those who never knew her last name. Her name became synonymous with resilience, strength, and undeniable talent. More than just an exemplary employee, she became a symbol, a living reminder that behind every quiet face, there may be a power the world hasn't had the chance or the sensitivity to recognize. Camilla never sought that recognition, but it came because greatness, even when hidden, always finds its place. Some people still try to figure out what exactly she had done that was so extraordinary. It wasn't just the fact that she spoke 10 languages. It wasn't just the heroic act of saving a critical meeting. It was everything. The journey. The way she overcame subtle prejudice, institutional arrogance, the looks that treated her like she was invisible. It was her unshakable faith in better days. Her daily persistence. Her continued effort, even when nothing promised results. That's what inspired people, because deep down, everyone carries invisible battles, and seeing someone overcome theirs with such dignity struck a chord. The most surprising part? Camilla never changed. She still got her own coffee, still greeted the security guards with the same good morning, still sat with the interns in the cafeteria. There was no superiority in her gestures, only awareness. She knew who she was. She knew what it had cost to get there, and that's why she didn't need to prove anything to anyone. Her light came from silence, from consistency, from the faith that had never left her, not even in her darkest seasons. Over time, younger employees started looking up to her. Some shyly asked for study tips. Others just observed from a distance, learning from the way she carried herself. Camilla welcomed them all, because she knew, sometimes, changing the world starts by changing one person's world. She had once been that invisible person, and now she wanted to be the presence she had needed during her own silent days. The woman she once needed, but never had. Now, she was that woman. One afternoon, during a corporate event, an executive from the head office stepped onto the stage to give a speech. And at one point, he referenced Camilla without saying her name. Sometimes, the brightest talents wear temporary badges. And when those talents have persistence, faith, and courage, they become unforgettable. The audience applauded. Camilla, sitting in the back row, lowered her eyes and smiled. That was enough. She didn't need trophies. Her reward was knowing she had won, inside and out. And still, there were hard days. Because life doesn't become a fairy tale after a single victory. She knew that, but she also knew she now had tools. She had a voice. She had space. And most of all, she had faith. The same faith that carried her through an unstable childhood, a nomadic adolescence, and an internship full of silence. The same faith that kept her standing through humiliation, that taught her how to turn pain into strength, and how to turn mockery into triumph. Years later, a new intern joined the company. Quiet, soft-spoken, she sat in the same chair Camilla used to sit in. And when she saw Camilla walk by in the hallway, the girl gave a timid smile. Camilla stopped, walked over, and said, "If you ever need help, I'm here." Then she kept walking, because now she was the bridge, the reference, the mirror, and her legacy wasn't in company files. It lived in the eyes of every young person hoping to be seen for who they are, not just for how they appear. Some would call it luck, others destiny. But Camilla knew the truth. It was effort. It was persistence. It was faith. Luck might open a door, but it's quiet preparation that gives you the strength to walk through it. And she had prepared, for years, with no audience, no applause, only the deep belief that someday it would all make sense. And it did, not in the form of applause, but in lasting recognition. Her name, once forgotten on intern lists, was now engraved on plaques, mentioned in meetings, used as an example in training sessions. But more than all of that, it was remembered in people's hearts. Because with every step she took, Camilla proved that you should never judge someone by their badge, their title, or their appearance. After all, how could anyone forget the woman who didn't just translate languages, but the true meaning of resilience? Tell us in the comments. Have you ever been underestimated because of your position, appearance, or age? Like this video if you believe real talent doesn't need a stage, just a chance. Subscribe to the channel for more inspiring stories like this one.